The most beneficent and the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum students. So the topic of our today's lecture is cardiac muscles. Today we will be discussing that what are the types of cardiac muscles, what is the general histology of cardiac muscles, and how is it related to the physiology, or how the general histology supports the physiology of cardiac muscles. Furthermore, we will be discussing that what are the characteristics of cardiac muscles and through what phases cardiac muscles have to pass through to achieve contraction. Lastly, we will be discussing the excitation contraction coupling mechanism of cardiac muscles. Okay, so let's start with the introduction of cardiac muscles. Cardiac muscles are the basic contractile machinery of our heart and they are self excitatory. So there are three groups of, or the three types of cardiac muscles: atrial muscles, ventricular muscles, specialized excitatory and conductive system of heart. So there are atrial muscles which will make the atria, there are ventricular muscles which will make the ventricles, and there are specialized excitatory and conductive system of heart, which is not the main function of which is not contraction or the pumping of blood, rather it is maintaining a continuous and rhythmical electrical discharge. So they maintain a continuous and rhythmical electrical discharge through which, or under the influence of which, atrial muscles and ventricular muscles relax. Okay, so up till now the thing should be clear that the atrial and ventricular muscles are responsible for the pumping of blood, while the contraction of both these groups of muscles is due to specialized excitatory and conductive system of heart. Okay, now coming towards the atrial muscles. These are the muscles of atria which form the atrial syncytium. There are two syncytium of heart, or the two functional units of heart. One will be the atrial syncytium, and the other will be the ventricular syncytium. The atrial syncytium contract together, while which means that the right atrium and the left atrium will be contracting together, while the ventricular muscles form another type of syncytium called the ventricular syncytia, and they will be contracting together. The histological basis of this, the formation of the syncytium, explain in a few minutes. Okay, now the atrial muscles act as a primer pump for the ventricles. What will the atria do? The atria will collect blood from the superior and inferior vena cava as well as the pulmonary vein, and they will fill up their cells with blood, and when they will contract, the blood will move towards the ventricle. So it is necessary that the atria should contract ahead of ventricles. The atrial muscles get innervation with from the specialized excitatory and conductive system of the heart, which has got five components. The main component is the sinoatrial node, or the SA node, which is also known as the pacemaker of the heart. It has mainly five components: SA node, internodal pathway, AV node or the atrioventricular node, bundle of His or the right and left bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers. So mainly it has got how many components? It has got five components. The sinoatrial node is located in the superior lateral side of the right atrium. So it will generate impulse in the right atrium, and the right atrium will contract. It will get impulses and it will contract, and after it will share its impulse with its partner or the left atrium, and then they both will contract and give a wave on the ECG called the P wave. Okay, so the contraction of atrial muscles produces a wave known as P wave on the ECG. Both of these muscles will contract, and then the impulse will travel through the AV node to the bundle of His Purkinje fibers, and of course it will also stimulate ventricular muscles. Once the atrial muscles have been contracted, there will be a delay because SA node is in the atrium. So the atrial will contract, the atria will contract first, and then there will be a delay of about 0.1 seconds, and then the ventricular muscles will also contract. And the duration of contraction of atrial muscles is 0.2 seconds, while the duration of contraction of ventricular muscles is 0.3 seconds. Now both of them are functioning as a syncytium. Now the question is, why isn't the impulse of the atrial muscles traveling directly to the ventricular muscles? The impulse generated for atrial muscles, why isn't it directly passing to the ventricular muscles, rather it is passing through the specialized conductive system? So the answer lies in the fact that these two syncytia are separated by fibrous tissue at the atrioventricular valvular openings. So of course, because they are separated by the fibrous tissue, the impulse cannot be conducted across that fibrous tissue, and thus are these both syncytia have been separated, and they cannot the atrial impulses cannot travel directly to the ventricles. Now, coming towards this part of the cardiac muscles, these are the specialized excitatory and conductive system. Their function is to generate automatic and rhythmical electrical discharge for the contraction of these two groups of muscles. Okay, now the question is that if the cardiac muscles are controlled by a specialized group of another specialized group of cardiac muscles, then what are the other nerves, which are other nerves of heart doing? For example, there is a nerve called vagus nerve which controls the activity of heart. So why are these nerves there in the heart? The answer lies in the fact that they are not providing direct innervation or innervation for contraction. Rather, they are playing a regulatory role. What are they doing? They are playing a regulatory role in increasing or decreasing the heart rate. Okay, so that's all about the cardiac muscle types. Now coming towards the cardiac muscle histology. Here we have a cardiac muscle fiber. The cardiac muscle fiber, from the histological point of view, they present a lattice work. Okay, the fiber will divide, recombine, and then spread again. Divide, there will be a fiber which will divide, recombine, and spread again. Okay, and it also has striation, that has cross striations due to the orderly arrangement of actin and myosin filaments. Furthermore, it contains intercalated disc. This is the special feature of cardiac muscles, that they contain what? They contain intercalated disc, which is responsible for the formation of syncytium, both the atrial syncytium and as well as the ventricular syncytium. So, what are intercalated discs? Intercalated discs are actually fused cell membranes which are connected to each other, which connect both the cells through gap and tight junctions. Okay, when they are connected to gap through the cells are connected to each other through gap and tight junctions, they allow the flow of ions. Okay, of course, the impulse is also a flow or the wave of flow of ions. Cells will share their impulses and thus will form a syncytium. This point should be clear. Okay, and the intracellular fluid lies along the longitudinal axis of the cardiac muscle fibers. Now, coming towards the phases through which cardiac muscles have to pass to achieve contraction, there are approximately 5 phases of contraction. First, we will be looking at the phases of contraction, and then we will be looking at the characteristics of the cardiac muscle fibers. Now, the first phase is also known as the phase 0, which is the depolarization. There will be firstly we know that at RMP there is negativity inside while positivity outside. The thing that will happen is the sodium channels will open as the wave of depolarization reaches this cell membrane. The sodium channels will be open and there will be a huge influx of sodium ions, due to which positivity will spread in the inner membrane. When the positivity spreads in the inner membrane becomes more positive as compared to the outer membrane. So the inner membrane potential changes from a very negative value to a positive value, and this is known as what? This is known as depolarization or the phase 0. Now coming towards the phase 1, when the depolarization has occurred, and of course in influence of that there will be in influence of this electrical event, there will be a mechanical event known as contraction. Okay, so we will have contraction. We will be discussing it in the excitation contraction coupling. For now, the thing we have to look on the thing we have to focus on is the phases. First, there will be sodium channel opening, then there will be initial repolarization. Of course, we know that the repolarization is due to the efflux of potassium ions. There will be an initial efflux of potassium ions, and this initial efflux of potassium ions will result in a bit of repolarization. So there the graph will be phase 0. There was a huge influx of sodium, so there will be depolarization, and then there will be slight repolarization. After that, what will happen is there will be calcium induced calcium influx. It is the most important point in this whole plateau, that the phase 2 or the plateau is there will be calcium induced calcium influx. Now, what is calcium induced calcium influx? The thing is that just like skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles have also got T tubules. When the impulse travels across the T tubules, the T tubules have specialized calcium channel receptors which will open and they will allow the entry of calcium ions. Okay, there will be a small influx of calcium ions. Due to this small influx of calcium ions, the sarcoplasmic reticulum of the cardiac muscles will also open. It will open its calcium channels through which a huge influx of calcium will occur inside the sarcoplasm. Okay, so this will be called as what? Calcium induced calcium influx. Due to this calcium induced calcium influx, there will be a phase called plateau phase, which will be responsible for the longer duration of action potential in the cardiac muscle fibers. So it will further cause depolarization. It will cause increase the time of depolarization or the action potential. Due to this, the cardiac muscles become fatigueless. Due to this, the cardiac muscles become fatigueless because they have adequate rest period. They will have what? They will have adequate rest period. Why? Because when there is action potential, there is absolute refractory period. This is a period in which the cardiac muscles or any kind of muscles cannot respond to any other further stimulus. When they will not respond to any other further stimulus, it means they are having rest. And when they are having rest, this property makes them fatigueless. Okay, so this property, this plateau property, this calcium induced calcium influx makes them fatigueless. And the second thing that participates in this plateau phase is the decreased permeability of calcium. When there is a huge calcium influx, the permeability of potassium decreases approximately 15 folds, so that it cannot travel outside the cell membrane, and thus there is the potassium permeability is decreased, and there will be plateau instead of repolarization. There will be what? There will be plateau instead of repolarization. After this whole plateau thing, there will be of course the calcium will again move out of the cell, and there will be a appropriate mechanism through which calcium will be removed out of the cell. And this mechanism we will be discussing in excitation contraction coupling. For now, the thing you have to remember is that the calcium is removed from the cell, and there will be rapid repolarization due to the slow potassium channels. These slow potassium channels will cause the efflux of large quantities of potassium, so that the inner membrane again becomes negative and achieves resting membrane potential. Okay, I hope that it's clear. Now we will be discussing the characteristics of cardiac muscles. The characteristics of cardiac muscles are excitability, conductivity, contractility, and rhythmicity. Of course, their muscles, they will have contractility. They will allow conduction of impulses. That's why they allow conduction of impulses. That is why they have the property of conductivity. And excitability means they can respond to certain impulses. Okay, they can respond to certain impulses, as we have discussed, that there will be an impulse and there will be more positivity inside, more negativity outside. The action potential will be generated. This property is known as what? It is known as excitability. They have excitability, conductivity, contractility, and they have rhythmicity. So this point is really very important, that the contraction is not arrhythmic, that sometimes the contraction is taking place for longer duration, sometimes it's for shorter duration. No. If the whole the machinery is normal, there will be a definite and perfect rhythm due to the specialized conductive system of heart, which was the rhythm is generated due to what? It is due to specialized conductive system of heart, and there is a rhythmicity in contraction. Okay, now coming towards another property which is known as fatiguelessness. I have told you before that the cardiac muscles will be fatigueless, and there are two contributing factors. The cardiac muscles are fatigueless due to longer duration of action, and the longer duration of action is due to two reasons. One is the fast sodium channels or the slow sodium calcium channels. One is the fast sodium channels or slow sodium calcium channels. What will happen is that there will be influx of calcium ions, due to which action potential will be the duration of action potential will be more as compared to the as compared to the skeletal muscles. Okay, and there are of course fast sodium channels, and The second point is the decreased permeability of potassium ions. This decreased permeability of potassium ions also contributes to the plateau. So the main 2 points contributing in the plateau are responsible for the longer duration of action potential, because actually the plateau phase is responsible for the longer duration of action potential. And due to these reasons, in the longer duration of action potential, there won't be tetanization as in muscle cells, as in skeletal muscle cells. There won't be tetanization and tetanization was what? Frequency summation. This means that cardiac muscles fibers cannot summate impulses. There will be no summation and no tetanization. So they are fatigueless and they cannot tetanize. Furthermore, we have also discussed that there will be calcium induced calcium influx, and which will result in plateau phase, and it is also not present in skeletal muscles. And this cardiac muscles respond in two mechanical ways. One is the contraction and the other one is the relaxation. The contraction period is known as systole, while the relaxation period is known as diastole. Now we will have a quick concept about the excitation contraction coupling. Now what will happen is that there will be initiation of action potential through the sarcolemma, and it will travel through the tubules. The point you have to remember is that skeletal muscle contains triads of T tubules, while the cardiac muscles contain dyads of T tubules. T tubule, one component will be the T tubule and the other will be the terminal cisternae. So the thing that happens that's unique to the cardiac muscles is that the T tubules also conduct calcium. So the T tubules have specialized receptor channels called dihydropyridine receptor channels. These receptor channels will open and will allow small influx of calcium from the ECF. When there is small influx of calcium from the ECF inside the cell, there will be calcium-induced calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum of cardiac cells, which is not that well developed as in skeletal muscles. Okay, so there will be calcium-induced calcium release. Thus, there will be a huge influx of calcium ions into the cell, and the calcium will, it will interact with troponin C. It will bind with troponin C, which will result in a series of events due to which actin and myosin will form a bond, and thus contraction will take place. Muscle contraction will take place, and then will be the removal of calcium due to circa ATPase and sodium calcium exchanger. So what will happen is circa ATPase will work to move calcium from this sarcoplasmic reticulum by energy dependent processes, while the sodium calcium channels, what will they do? The thing they will do is they will cause efflux of calcium ions while influx of sodium ions. What will they cause? They will cause efflux of calcium ions while the efflux of calcium ions while the influx of sodium ions, efflux of calcium and influx of sodium. Now you will be thinking, if this mechanism is employed to remove calcium, there will be increased amount of sodium in the intracellular fluid, and it will of course cause problems. So to remove the sodium ions from the intracellular fluid, there is another mechanism which is known as sodium potassium ATPase pump. It will pump 3 sodium ions outside the cell and 2 potassium ions inside the cell, and thus calcium will be removed from the intracellular fluid and muscle relaxation will take place. Okay, so that's all for today. I hope you find this video useful. Stay tuned and get subscribed to my channel.